So in today's video, I'm going to attempt the unthinkable. That's right, I'm going to try to explain jazz theory in one video. So I've broken this lesson into 3 sections. First of all, chords, then chord progressions, and last of all, scales. So these are 3 of the main topics in jazz theory. These are the main topics which cause a lot of confusion. So by the end of this lesson, you're going to walk away with a deeper confidence in your understanding of jazz. Now we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to get straight in. Enjoy the video. So first of all, let's talk about jazz chords. Now chords in jazz go a lot higher than in other styles of music. So in most styles of music, you'll only encounter 3-note chords. These are known as triads. So you'll play the root, the third, and the fifth. And you can get different types of chord within just these 3 notes. So you can get a major chord, a minor chord, an augmented chord, and a diminished chord. However, in jazz, we build this stack of thirds higher. So instead of just stopping at the 5th, we'll go up and add another third above the 5th, which gives us the 7th. And all of these numbers are numbered from the root of the chord. So if this is a C chord, then this is 1. We call this the root. So 1, 3, 5, 7. And that's why all chord extensions are generally odd numbers, because they're built in thirds, which means we're skipping every other note. So 1, 3, 5, 7. Then we can go up to the 9th. We can even go up to the 11th. And we can even go up to the 13th. And 13 is pretty much the biggest number you'll see in a chord, because if you go up a third from 13, then you come back to the root. So there's never a 15 in jazz. It's always 7th chords, 9th chords, 11th chords, and 13th chords. So now let's get specific and look at the actual types of 7th chord. There's different types of 7th chord. They all are based on the same idea. They have a root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. But we can create different types of 7th chord by making different combinations of the major third and the minor third. So we're going to go through the 3 main 7th chords to begin with. First of all, we have a major 7 chord. This is C major 7. So if you just imagine the notes of C major scale, and you just play the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, then you get a major 7 chord. Next, let's look at the minor 7 chord. This is C minor 7, and if you just imagine a minor scale, C minor scale, and you just play the root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th of that scale, well, you end up playing a minor 7 chord. And next we have the dominant 7 chord. Here is C dominant 7. So it's basically a major triad, but with a minor 7th. So those are the 3 most common types of 7th chord in jazz. I would say about 90% of jazz music is built of just these 3 7th chords. Again, the major 7 chord, the minor 7 chord, and the dominant 7 chord, and they're all just different combinations of major thirds and minor thirds. Now above any type of 7th chord you can add what's known as chord extensions, and these are the 9th, the 11th and 13th, which we mentioned just a moment ago. So for the chord below, the root, 3rd, 5th and 7th are known as chordal tones, chord tones, the root, 3rd, 5th and 7th, whatever type of chord it is, minor 7, dominant 7, etc. But above these you can add a chord extension like the 9th, the 11th, or the 13th, or all 3. You get all sorts of big chords like this. So how do you find the 9th, the 11th and the 13th? Well, regardless of what type of chord it is, whether it's a major 7 chord, minor 7 chord, or a dominant 7 chord, the chord extensions are always built from the major scale. So you imagine a major scale from the root of the chord. So this is a C chord. Doesn't matter what chord type it is. We're just going to imagine a major scale starting from the root. And you're going to find the chord extensions based on that major scale. So the 9th is really the same note as the 2 of the scale, so the 1, 2. The 11th is the same as the 4th, so 3, 4, that's our 11th. And the 13th is the same as the 6th, which is 5, 6. So even if it's a minor 7 chord, let's take a C minor 7 chord here. If it tells you to add a 9th, 11th or 13th, you would still imagine C major scale to find those notes. It's going to be the same 9th, the same 11th and the same 13th as if it was a major 7 chord or a dominant 7 chord. This is the natural 9th, the natural 11th and the natural 13th, and they're all built from the major scale. Now the extended harmony notes can also be altered, which means they can be sharpened or flattened. So you won't always just see 9, 11, 13. Sometimes you'll see flat 9, sharp 9, you'll see sharp 11, and sometimes you'll see flat 13. So how do you find an altered chord extension? Well, let's say the chord symbol says C dominant 7, flat 9. Well, we're going to start by finding the natural extension first, and we just imagine the major scale. So C major scale is going to be D natural, and then you flatten it. And that's your chord extension, that's the flat 9. Or if it said sharp 9, again you find the natural 9 first, and then sharpen it. Or if it said C7 sharp 11, well, you find the natural 11 first, so run up the major scale to the 4th, which is the 11th, and then sharpen it. And the same if it was the 13th, C dominant 7, flat 13, let's say, find the natural 13 first by running up the major scale, and then flatten it. That's where you get these nice chords with altered extensions, things like the flat 9, sharp 11, and flat 13. Now before we move on to the next topic, I've actually notated a chord symbol reference guide for you. You can download that for free at the link below. And you'll get my 1-page sheet where I've just notated all of the common types of 7th chord, 9th chord, 11th chord, and 13th chord. So now a quick word on chord voicings. So there's many different ways that you can play any chord in jazz. So if we just take a look at the 7th chords, this C major 7 chord which we've looked at. So if you imagine a group of singers were singing this, well, each note is a voice, a separate voice, and we can redistribute these voices and turn them upside down and add a few notes in and do all sorts of things to create different voicings. These are called chord voicings. So just to demonstrate, we can play this, which is a literal voicing. You're playing literally what the chord symbol says. Then there's more sophisticated voicings like 4th voicings. It's just a stack of fourths using notes from C major scale. We also have 5th voicings, where we're using mostly fifths. And this is still considered a voicing for C major 7. And really the list goes on, there's all sorts of possibilities. So now let's talk about chord progressions in jazz. So every style of music has its own characteristic chord progressions. So classical music has its sort of 1-4-5-1 type progressions. We have pop music which has those sort of 4 pop chords you might have heard of. Well, jazz is the same. We have what's known as the 2-5-1 chord progression. Now there's 2 types of 2-5-1. There's a major 2-5-1 and a minor 2-5-1. Let's start by looking at the major 2-5-1 because this is far more common. So let's demonstrate a major 2-5-1 in the scale of C major. So this is going to be a set of 3 chords that are going to be built from the notes of C major scale. And the 2, 5, and 1 refers to which scale degree we're building the chord from. So the 2 chord is going to be built from the 2nd note of the scale. That's going to be D. And we're just going to build a stack of thirds up to the 7th using notes from C major scale, which is all the white notes. And this gives us what type of chord? This is a D chord. This is D minor 7. Next, we're going to find the 5 chords, so we're going to find the 5th scale degree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's going to be G, and we're going to do the same thing. Let's build a stack of thirds up from G using notes of C major scale. And this is a dominant 7 chord, G dominant 7. And then let's find the 1 chord, it's going to be built from the root, And we're going to build a stack of thirds using notes of C major scale, so every other note gives us this. And what type of chord is this? That's right, that's a major 7 chord. So 3 different types of chord: a minor 7 chord, a dominant 7 chord, and a major 7 chord, and they're built from the 2, the 5, and the 1 of the scale. So that's why it's called a 2-5-1. Now, a very distinctive part of this 2-5-1 is the bass line, which sounds like this. You hear this pattern all of the time in jazz. It's the 2 going up a 4th to the 5, which goes down a 5th to the root. You hear this all the time. So most of jazz is built of this major 2-5-1 chord progression, and that's why most of the chord types that you see in a real book or in a lead sheet are going to be these 3 chord types. It's the minor 7 chord, the dominant 7 chord, and a major 7 chord. Now in jazz, you don't always get the complete 2-5-1. Sometimes you do, which is nice, you get all 3 chords, but sometimes the composer cuts the 2-5-1 short. So a good example would be Satin Doll. Here we have a D minor 7 going to a G dominant 7, but you don't get the 1 chord, which would be C major 7. You just get 2, 5, 2, 5, and then he modulates to a different key, and we have an E minor 7 chord going to an A dominant 7. What's that? Well, that's another 2-5. In which key? If E minor 7 is the 2 chord and A dominant 7 is the 5 chord, then we're going to be in the key of D major. So this is another 2-5. And sometimes you get a 5-1, so you don't always get the 2 chords, sometimes you just get the 5-1. An example would be Stomping at the Savoy. We have a C dominant 7 chord going down a 5th to an F major 7 chord. Well, what's that? That's a 5-1 progression in F major, but we don't have the 2 chord here, which would be G minor 7, because that's the 2 chord. We don't get the 2 chord, we just have the 5-1. And to end this section, let's talk about the minor 2-5-1, which is much less common than the major 2-5-1. I would say that only about 10% of 2-5-1s are the minor 2-5-1. But let's demonstrate in C minor. So the concept is the same. We're going to have 3 chords built from the 2, the 5, and the 1. But instead of building from the major scale, we're going to build from the harmonic minor scale. A normal minor scale up to the 5th. We have a minor 6th. But then we have a major 7th. So really this is just a normal minor scale, except it has a major 7th. And let's see what 3 chords we get. So let's find the 2 chord. I'm going to build a stack of thirds upwards using the notes of C harmonic minor scale here. I'm going to do F, I'm going to do A flat, and C. And this introduces a new type of 7th chord, which we haven't looked at yet. And this is called the half diminished chord, although it's sometimes also called a minor 7 chord flat 5. Now let's find the 5 chord. This is the 5th G. Let's build a stack of thirds using notes from C harmonic minor. Remember, we have that major 7th of the scale. We have a D natural and an F. And what type of chord is this? Well, this is the same dominant 7 chord that you get in the major 2-5-1, so nothing's new here. And finally, let's find the 1 chord. We're going to get a minor 3rd, a natural 5th, and then we're going to get that major 7th, B natural. And here we get another type of 7th chord, which we haven't looked at yet. This is called C minor major 7. C minor major 7. Now you've heard the minor 2-5-1 in songs like Blue Bossa. So that was a minor 2-5-1 in our key that we're already in of C minor, D half diminished, G dominant 7, going to C minor major 7. And sometimes with the minor 2-5-1, the one chord gets tweaked. It's not always played as a minor major 7 chord. Sometimes the composer will write it as a minor 7 chord, so we might do D half diminished, going to G dominant 7, going to C minor 7. And this is done because it's just more of a casual sound. As a composer, you don't always want this sort of intense sound of this minor major 7 chord. It's quite an intense chord, and sometimes composers will tweak it and make it a minor 7 chord. And finally for today, let's talk about scales. So as a jazz musician, it's essential that you know what scale to play from over any chord type. This is going to be useful if you're ever improvising or if you're composing a melody. Well, you need to know what scale to play from when you're playing any chord. So the first key principle is to make sure that the scale you use agrees on the chordal tones of the chord. So if you have a C major 7 chord, that means that your scale has to have a C, an E, a G, and a B natural, and it's not going to work if you play an E flat or any notes that disagree with these 4 chordal tones. So if it's a major 7 chord, root 3rd, 5th, and 7th. If it's a minor 7 chord, same thing, but tweak them to this type of chord. And if it's a dominant 7 chord, make sure you have your chordal tones. Now when it comes to the remaining notes, the 2, 4 and 6, you actually have some freedom here. You can tweak them different ways and it will generally sound consonant over the chord as long as there's no clash with the chordal tones. However, I'm going to share with you a good principle that you can follow certainly as a beginner or an intermediate jazz pianist, and that is the chordal tone plus whole step principle. This is just one method that you can use to choose which scale to play over any chord type. So let's say we have C major 7. You're going to start with the chordal tones, the root, the major 3rd, the 5th, and the major 7th, and then we're going to add a whole step to the root 3rd and 5th. So C upper whole step gives us D, E upper whole step gives us F sharp, a sharp 4, that's nice, and G upper whole step gives us A natural, a major 6th. And we end up playing what's called C Lydian scale. So over the major 7 chords, we can use this principle. Whatever the chord is, this will always work well. If it's a minor 7 chord, C minor 7, same thing, chordal tones first, and then we'll add a whole step to the root 3rd and 5th, gives us D natural, E flat upper whole step gives us F natural, and G upper whole step gives us A. And that gives us C Dorian scale. So we can play the Dorian scale over minor 7 chords. And last of all, let's look at the dominant 7 chord, chordal tones first. We have to have these in place to sound consonant. And then let's add a whole step to the root 3rd and 5th. Gives us D natural, E upper whole step gives us F sharp, the sharp 4, and G upper whole step gives us A. We end up playing this very nice sophisticated scale that's called the Lydian dominant scale. This is C Lydian dominant scale. And that's a great scale to play over dominant 7 chords. Now, one of the most confusing aspects of jazz piano is all of the different chord symbols that we get. We have 7th chords, 9th chords, 11th chords. So to help you with this, I've put together a chord symbol reference guide. You can download it for free at the link below. And I've just notated all of the common chord symbols which you encounter as a jazz pianist. And this is just going to help you get clarity on jazz piano chord symbols.